Ending a TV show is not an easy thing to do, and you can see that from the amount of bad endings that there have been to television shows over the years. But what shows got it right? What are the best TV endings of all time? Well, today we're looking to find out. Hey there, Tim from Screen OD here. I hope you're doing well and having a great day. Thanks so much for tuning in. Hopefully we can make your day even better, especially if you're one of those sort of people, and let's face it, who isn't the sort of person who likes TV series to end well. Unfortunately, they don't all end well, and sometimes shows that are particularly big and have run for a particularly long period of time do disappoint a lot of their fans when they come to an end. A notable example recently where people, well, they certainly were divided by the ending was Game of Thrones. Now, it seemed like it was almost impossible to please everyone with that ending, but there was certainly a lot of people who weren't very happy. Well, we're not going to talk about that today, and please don't start talking about the end of Game of Thrones again, because we've been through that and it's time to move on. But what we are going to look at today is some shows that I think had really good endings. Now, if you agree, please in the comments below say I agree. But even more interestingly, if you've got examples of shows that you think ended really well, then tell me in the comments below and we can discuss them as a Screen OD community. Before we start with our first show, just a quick reminder that if you love TV and movies, please subscribe to the channel and you'll get all the best content direct to your feed. And if you like this video, find it entertaining or informative, please hit the like button and share the love with people on YouTube. Right, the first show I'm going to talk about, which I think had an ending that I thought was very, very good, but a lot of people, well, you know, sort of divided on this, and there continues to be debate about whether or not it was a good ending or not. It's The Sopranos. Now, there's no doubt that The Sopranos is one of the greatest shows ever made, one of the best dramas of the modern era, and a show that changed TV forever. It was one of those shows that invented box set culture. It made people think that TV was the cool place to be. It brought in cinematic values, and it made storytelling on the small screen something to behold. It was led by the brilliant central performance of the late great James Gandolfini as Tony Soprano, a mobster in therapy. His life, his love, his family, all of those things coming together across a brilliantly crafted series from David Chase. Now, The Sopranos ended in a way that didn't have everyone happy, but it certainly made me happy. Now, this is one of the great ambiguous TV endings. Now, leaving the viewer with something to think about is often a great thing to do as a program maker, rather than tying up all the loose ends completely. Now, the issue is that some shows leave too many loose ends untied. Let's talk about Lost another day. But in The Sopranos, you have a beautifully crafted ending. You have three members of the Soprano family sitting in the diner. The jukebox is blaring with Don't Stop Believing by Journey, and Meadow is on her way. Tony looks up. There is a ring at the door as the door of the diner opens. Is it Meadow coming through the door? Is it someone else coming through the door? Is Tony just being paranoid? There is a cut to black. The music stops, and that's the end. Yeah. That's what happens. But what did happen? Well, we don't know exactly what happened. Was Tony finally hit by a mobster? Was it Meadow just coming through the door? Was this some sort of allegory for the paranoia that Tony Soprano was always going to have and will always have as a character? Is he always going to be looking over his shoulder, no matter, even if it's just a family occasion at the diner? That's the question that we're asking ourselves, and the answers, well, the answers are the ones that we will have to imagine for ourselves, but it's a fantastic ending and one of the great TV endings, and that's why it's made it into this video. Now, this next one is certainly a show that will go down in the history books. They've probably been digitized now, so the history files on your computer, smartphone, or implanted into your head, it will go down in history as one of the great dramas. And in the modern era, there's been very few shows that have been as good as Vince Gilligan's classic piece of television, Breaking Bad. But it wasn't just a great journey, it was a great ending. Of course, the story of Walter White and Jesse Pinkman, the chemistry teacher who has terminal cancer, who decides to become a drug kingpin and cooking meth in his labs to be able to provide for his family after he's gone, and his student Jesse, who works alongside him, and they get mixed up in all sorts, and it gets worse and worse and worse until finally that bleak final season comes together. And that's where the ending is just as beautiful as the rest of the show. Now, Walter White always lived on his own terms. As Heisenberg, he did what he had to do. He was the one who came to knock, and therefore it's no surprise that he died and he ended his journey on his own terms too. Now, they could have ended the show in a way that had remorse, that had regret, that had attempts at reconciliation, but no, that's not what Walter White would have done. Walter White died at the hands of a gunshot in a meth lab, and he slides away smiling to the brilliant tune of Badfinger's Baby Blue, which is, of course, a reference to the meth that he's cooked throughout the show. This is as his lab is encircled and we see the camera shot go up into the heavens. We see him drift away in the place that he would have chosen to do it. This is a fantastic ending to what was a fantastic show, and it ends with Walter White at the very centre of a universe in a show that was always about him. Another ambiguous ending now, and this one is one that continues to be debated. What does it mean? Now, Mad Men, again, just like The Sopranos and just like Breaking Bad, is one of those series that is on everyone's list that you should watch before you die. And Mad Men is one of the great box sets of our era, a slow burn drama from Matthew Weiner that tells the story of Don Draper, an advertising executive in Madison Avenue in New York. It's about him, it's about his life, and it's about those who work around him. And it's a journey, this show, because the time that it starts with Don Draper at the beginning, at the top of the world, and the time that it ends, and the way that the world has changed throughout that period of the 1960s, moving into the 1970s, the way that everything has changed is represented in this ending. We see Don Draper at the very end of the show. He is a shadow of who we see at the beginning. Things have changed dramatically for him, and he is on some sort of search for inner peace to find himself. And so we have Don Draper. He's with the hippies now. He's on a cliffside in California. The wind in his hair, the waves crashing beside him. And as we see him sitting there amongst these people, we start to see one of the greatest, one of the most famous adverts of all time play. I'd like to buy the world a Coke, the 1971 advert that many would know by heart still today. And now we have to ask ourselves, what has Don Draper done here? Has he finally found inner peace and let everything go? Or has he found a way of turning this experience into something commercial? Has he commercialized the hippie movement in order to be able to sell sugared water to the masses? Now, that's something we'll never know, but what a great ending to a great series that is. And that's why, again, it's on the list. Like to buy the world a Coke and keep it company. When it comes to television shows, there aren't many much bigger in the history of television than the sitcom Friends. Running from 1994 until 2004, this show was far more than just a comedy. It was a true pop culture phenomenon, and not just in America and not just in the UK, but across the globe. The antics of Ross and Rachel and Monica and Chandler and Joey and Phoebe are antics that people all over the world are familiar with, and not just one generation who grew up watching it for the first time in the 90s and the early noughties, but successive generations continue to discover this comedy and watch and rewatch it on streaming platforms. It truly is a behemoth in television terms. And how do you end something? How do you end a show like that? A show that people have grown up watching, a show where we have seen the actors grow and develop into completely new people. We've seen their private lives analysed under microscopes by the press for the last decade. How do you end a show like that? The answer is you recognise that all that has happened and you play to it. And that's what Friends did so brilliantly in those last few scenes. We see the friends back together. Their lives have moved on immeasurably since we first met them as 20-somethings trying to make their way in the world in New York. Now all of their lives have changed and they're all about to go in different directions on different journeys. In some cases together, in partnerships for life, in other cases with children, in other cases they're off to explore new adventures. But what we have seen is them go on this journey, and what the show recognises is just how much has changed and how much will have changed for the people who grew up watching the show in that decade as well. And that final scene where they're standing in the empty apartment and they're putting their keys onto the side and they're saying goodbye to each other and they're saying goodbye to a life. They're also saying goodbye to the audience. And I think that that is done really, really well without it being too soppy, without it being too saccharine sweet. There is a real emotional end to an era. And I don't think it's overstating it was the end of an era of comedy when Friends came to an end. And of course they can't resist one final joke as they walk out and they say, "Shall we get one final coffee?" And of course Chandler says, "Where?" We all know where. They're off, of course, to Central Perk. But this is a great mix of sentimentality and of comedy. It's not easy to end comedies at all, and especially ones with such beloved characters. But this is done really, really well. This last show is a great drama. It's probably, again, up there in one of the best dramas of the modern era. It probably doesn't get talked about as much as some of the other big HBO shows like The Sopranos or The Wire. It's not necessarily always put in those top lists, but I think it deserves to be. It's a show that's very dark, it's very twisty, it's got great characters, it's got really interesting storylines, it's a little bit offbeat and it's got some comic elements to it. 6 Feet Under is a show that if you haven't already seen, you should go and watch. But actually go and watch it before you watch the end of this video, because I'm about to tell you how it ends. And the way it ends is why it's on the list, not just because it's a great show. So if you haven't seen it already, either put your hands over your ears and your eyes, or I don't know how you're going to do it. Probably just switch it off. Anyway, the ending is fantastic. Here's what happens. The show ends with a really interesting technique, the fast forward. And this has been a show that has been about life, but because it's set in a funeral home, it is of course often framed by death. And the final scene of the show, we see Claire, the youngest member of the family, get into a car and start to drive away. She's listening to See Us Breathe, which is a great soundtrack to what happens next, which is we see each member of the family, the central people from the show, we see how they die and we see their funerals. And this kind of fast forward through their lives is a really interesting device to have in a show. And it's perfect for a show that was all about death and funerals. And it ends finally after we go step by step, seeing each of the members of the family pop their clogs. We see how Claire dies and we see when Claire dies. And it turns out she lives a very long time, over 100 years, according to her gravestone. It's a really, really well put together ending. It's a really thoughtful ending, and it's a really interesting technique that I think you will really enjoy if you like drama and you like great endings. Right, well, that's it. In my opinion, that's some of the best TV endings. Now, I know that everyone has their favourites, so leave in the comments below what your favourite TV endings are and why, and we can discuss them as a community. I'm sure that there are plenty of other brilliant ones that I haven't included, so I'd love to hear from you and hear what you think. Hopefully you've enjoyed the video. If you have done, please hit that like button so that other people get to enjoy it across the internet. And of course, if you like what we do here at Screen OD, please subscribe to the channel and you'll get all the greatest TV reviews and views all direct to your stream. So you don't have to do anything, you just kick back, relax, and your streaming life gets better. Right, until next time, thanks so much for watching. We'll see ya.